friends, today we will discuss about hypertension. The risk of cardiovascular diseases such as stroke and coronary artery disease is closely related to levels of blood pressure. Blood pressure follows a normal distribution in the general population, and there is no specific cutoff above which the risk of cardiovascular risk suddenly increases. The diagnosis of hypertension is therefore made when systolic and diastolic values rise above a specific threshold that corresponds to the level of BP at which the risk of cardiovascular complications and benefits of treatment outweigh the treatment cost and potential side effects of therapy. The British Hypertension Society Association defines mild hypertension as existing when the blood pressure is above 140/90 mmHg. Similar thresholds have been published by the European Society of Hypertension and the WHO International Society of Hypertension. The cardiovascular risk associated with high blood pressure depend on the combination of risk factors in an individual, such as age, gender, weight, physical activity, smoking, family history, serum cholesterol, diabetes mellitus, and pre-existing vascular disease. Now, definition of hypertension. Blood pressure is optimal when systolic blood pressure is less than 120 mmHg and diastolic blood pressure less than 80 mmHg. Normal up to less than 130 mmHg systolic and diastolic 85 mmHg. High normal is when systolic is 130 to 139 mmHg and diastolic is 85 to 89 mmHg. Hypertension grade 1 or mild when systolic blood pressure is 140 to 159 mmHg and diastolic blood pressure 90 to 99 mmHg. Grade 2 or moderate when systolic blood pressure 160 to 179 and diastolic 100 to 109 mmHg. In grade 3, which is severe hypertension, is when systolic blood pressure is equal to or more than 180 mmHg and diastolic blood pressure more than 110 mmHg. Isolated systolic hypertension grade 1 is 140 to 159 mmHg, whereas diastolic blood pressure less than 90, and grade 2 is more than or equal to 160 mmHg when diastolic blood pressure is less than 90. Now, what are the causes of secondary hypertension? The causes are alcohol, obesity, pregnancy, renal disease. Among renal disease, there may be parenchymal renal disease, particularly glomerulonephritis, renal vascular disease, polycystic kidney disease. Among endocrine disease, the causes are pheochromocytoma, Cushing syndrome, primary hyperaldosteronism, Cohen syndrome, glucocorticoid suppressible hyperaldosteronism, hyperparathyroidism, acromegaly, primary hypothyroidism, thyrotoxicosis, congenital adrenal hyperplasia due to 11 beta hydroxylase or 17 alpha hydroxylase deficiency, Liddle syndrome, 11 beta hydroxysteroid dehydrogenase deficiency, drugs, and coarctation of the aorta. Now, pathogenesis. What are the pathogenesis? Many factors may contribute to the regulation of blood pressure and the development of hypertension, including renal dysfunction, peripheral resistance, vessel tone, endothelial dysfunction, autonomic tone, insulin resistance, and neurohormonal factors. In more than 95% of cases, however, no specific underlying cause of hypertension can be found. Such patients are said to have essential hypertension. Hypertension is more common in some ethnic groups, particularly African American and Japanese, and approximately 40 to 60% is explained by genetic factors. Age is a strong risk factor in all ethnic groups. Important environmental factors include a high salt intake, heavy consumption of alcohol, obesity, and lack of exercise. Impaired intrauterine growth and low birth weight are associated with an increased risk of hypertension later in life. In about 5% of cases, hypertension is secondary to a specific disease. Hypertension has a number of adverse effects on the cardiovascular system. In larger arteries, which is more than 1 millimeter in diameter, the internal elastic lamina is thickened, smooth muscle is hypertrophied, and fibrous tissue is deposited. The vessels dilate and become tortuous, and their walls become less compliant. In smaller arteries less than 1 millimeter, hyaline arteriosclerosis occurs in the wall. The lumen narrows and aneurysms may develop. Widespread atheroma develops and may lead to coronary and cerebrovascular disease, particularly if other risk factors are present. These structural changes in the vasculature often perpetuate and aggravate hypertension by increasing peripheral vascular resistance and reducing renal blood flow, thereby activating the renin-angiotensin-aldosterone axis. Here is the fundal photograph, shows swollen optic disc, multiple retinal hemorrhage, and multiple coronal spot. It indicates it is a grade 4 hypertensive retinopathy. In image B, central retinal vein thrombosis, showing swollen optic disc and widespread fundal hemorrhage commonly associated with systemic hypertension. Now the clinical features. Hypertension is usually asymptomatic until the diagnosis is made at a routine physical examination or when a complication arises. Reflecting this fact, a BP check is advisable every 5 years in adults over 40 years of age to pick up occult hypertension. Sometimes clinical features may be observed that can give a clue to the underlying cause of hypertension. These include radiofemoral delay in patients with coarctation of the aorta, enlarged kidneys in patients with polycystic kidney disease, abdominal bruise that may result renal artery stenosis, and the characteristic phases and habitus of Cushing syndrome. Examination may also reveal evidence of risk factors for hypertension such as central obesity and hyperlipidemia. Other signs may be observed that are due to the complications of hypertension. These include signs of left ventricular hypertrophy, accentuation of the aortic component of the second heart sound and the fourth heart sound. Atrial fibrillation is common and may be due to diastolic dysfunction caused by left ventricular hypertrophy or the effects of coronary artery disease. Severe hypertension can cause left ventricular failure in the absence of coronary artery disease, particularly when there is an impairment of renal function. The optic fungi are often abnormal, and there may be evidence of generalized atheroma or specific complications such as aortic aneurysm, peripheral artery disease, or stroke. Examination of the optic fundi reveals a gradation of changes linked to the severity of hypertension. Fundoscopy can therefore provide an indication of the arteriolar damage occurring elsewhere. Cotton wool exudates are associated with retinal ischemia or infarction and fade in a few weeks. Hard exudates, small white dense deposits of lipids and microaneurysms dot hemorrhages are more characteristic of diabetic retinopathy. Hypertension is also associated with central retinal vein thrombosis. These are the grading of hypertensive retinopathy. Grade 1 shows arteriolar thickening, tortuosity and increased reflectiveness, that is silver wiring. Grade 2 is Grade 1 plus constriction of veins at arterial crossings, that is arteriovenous nipping. Grade 3. Grade 2 plus evidence of retinal ischemia, flame-shaped or blood hemorrhages and cotton wool exudates. Grade 4. Grade 3 plus papilloedema. Now the investigations. A decision to embark on antihypertensive therapy effectively commits the patient to lifelong treatment, so readings must be as accurate as possible. The objectives are to confirm the diagnosis by obtaining accurate representative BP measurements, identify contributory factors and any underlying causes, assess other risk factors and quantify cardiovascular risk, detect any complications that are already present, identify comorbidity that may influence the choice of antihypertensive therapy. Now the blood pressure measurements. Blood pressure measurements should be made to the nearest 2 mm mercury. in the sitting position with the arms supported and repeated after 5 minutes rest if the first recording is high. To avoid spuriously high readings in obese patients, the cuff should contain a bladder that encompasses at least two-thirds of the arm circumferences. Exercise, anxiety, discomfort, and unfamiliar surroundings can all lead to a transient rise in blood pressure. Sphygmomanometry, particularly when performed by a doctor, can cause a transient elevation in BP, which has been termed white coat hypertension. It has been established that up to 20% of patients who are found to have raised BP at outpatient clinics have a normal BP when it is recorded by automated devices used at home. The risk of cardiovascular disease in these patients is less than that in patients with sustained hypertension but greater than that in normotensive subjects. If clinic BP measurements show borderline levels of BP or if white coat hypertension is suspected, then ambulatory measurement of home-based measurements may be of value in confirming the diagnosis. Ambulatory blood pressure measurements. A series of automated ambulatory blood pressure measurements obtained over 24 hours or longer provide a better profile than a limited number of clinic readings and correlate more closely with evidence of target organ damage than causal BP measurements. Treatment thresholds and targets must be adjusted downwards. However, because ambulatory BP readings are systematically lower, approximately 12 over 7 mm mercury, than clinic measurements, the average ambulatory daytime, not 24-hour or nighttime BP, should be used to guide management decisions. Home blood pressure measurements. Patients can measure their own BP at home using a range of commercially available semi-automatic devices. The value of such measurements is less well established and is dependent on the environment and timing of the readings measured. Home or ambulatory BP measurements are particularly helpful in patients with unusually level blood pressure, those with refractory hypertension, those who may have symptomatic hypotension, and those in whom white coat hypertension is suspected. Other investigations. All hypertensive patients should undergo a limited number of investigations, but additional investigations are appropriate in patients younger than 40 years of age or those with resistant hypertension. Family history, lifestyle, exercise, salt intake, smoking habit, and other risk factors should also be recorded. A careful history will identify those patients with drug or alcohol-induced hypertension and may elicit the symptoms of other causes of secondary hypertension such as pheochromocytoma, paroxysmal headache, palpitation and sweating, or complications such as coronary artery disease. Now, how to measure blood pressure? Use a machine that has been validated, well maintained and properly calibrated. Measure sitting BP routinely with additional standing BP in elderly and diabetic patients and those with possible postural hypertension. Rest the patient for 2 minutes. Remove tight clothing from the arm. Support the arm at the level of the heart. Use a cuff of appropriate size. The bladder must encompass more than two-thirds of the arm. Lower the pressure slowly, 2 mm mercury per hour, 2 mm mercury per second. Lower the pressure slowly, 2 mm mercury per second. Read the BP to the nearest 2 mm mercury. Use phase 5, disappearance of sounds, to measure diastolic BP. Take 2 measurements at each visit. Investigation of hypertension. Urinalysis for blood, protein and glucose. Blood urea, electrolytes and creatinine. Hypokalemic alkalosis may indicate primary hyperaldosteronism. Hypokalemic alkalosis may indicate primary hyperaldosteronism but is usually due to diuretic therapy. Blood glucose, serum total and HDL cholesterol, thyroid function test, 12-lead ECG, left ventricular hypertrophy, coronary artery disease. Now, the management. The objective of antihypertensive therapy is to reduce the incidence of adverse cardiovascular events, particularly coronary artery disease, stroke, and heart failure. Randomized controlled trials have demonstrated that antihypertensive therapy can reduce the incidence of stroke and to a lesser extent coronary artery disease. The relative benefits, approximately 30% reduction in risk of stroke and 20% reduction in risk of coronary artery disease, are similar in all patient groups. So the absolute benefit of treatment, total number of events prevented, is greatest in those at highest risk. For example, to extrapolate from the Medical Research Council Mild Hypertension Trial 1985, 566 young patients would have to be treated with benroflumethiazide for 1 year to prevent one stroke, while in the Emerson trial of antihypertensive treatment in the elderly 1992, one stroke was prevented for every 286 patients treated for 1 year. A formal estimate of absolute cardiovascular risk, which takes account of all the relevant risk factors, may help to determine whether the likely benefits of therapy will outweigh its costs and hazards. A variety of risk algorithms are available for this purpose, such as the Joint British Society's Risk Calculator. Most of the excess morbidity and mortality associated with hypertension are attributable to coronary artery disease, and many treatment guidelines are therefore based on estimates of the 10-year coronary artery disease risk. Total cardiovascular risk can be estimated by multiplying coronary artery disease risk by 4 by 3. If coronary artery disease risk is 30%, cardiovascular risk is 40%. The value of this approach can be illustrated by comparing the two hypothetical cases on page 487. Specialized investigation of hypertension. Chest X-ray to detect cardiomegaly, heart failure, coarctation of the aorta. Ambulatory BP recording to assess borderline or white coat hypertension. Echocardiogram to detect or quantify left ventricular hypertrophy, renal ultrasound to detect possible renal disease, renal angiography to detect or confirm the presence of renal artery stenosis, urinary catecholamines to detect possible pheochromocytoma, urinary cortisol and dexamethasone suppression test to detect possible Cushing syndrome, plasma renin activity and aldosterone to detect possible primary aldosteronism. This is an example of cardiovascular risk prediction chart for non-diabetic man. Cardiovascular risk is predicted from the patient's age, sex, smoking habit, blood pressure, and cholesterol ratio. The ratio of total to high-density lipoprotein cholesterol can be determined in a non-fasting blood sample. Where HDL cholesterol concentration is unknown, it should be assumed to be 1 millimole per liter. The lipid scale should be used as total serum cholesterol. Current guidelines suggest initiation of primary prevention in individuals with a 10-year cardiovascular risk is 20% or more than 20%. Patients with diabetes mellitus should be assumed to have a 10-year cardiovascular risk of more than 20% or equal to 20% and receive secondary prevention therapy. To estimate an individual's absolute 10-year risk of developing cardiovascular disease, choose the panel for the appropriate gender, smoking status, and age. Within these, define the level of risk from the point where the coordinates for systolic blood pressure and ratio of the total to HDL cholesterol cross. Highest risk individuals are those whose 10-year cardiovascular risk exceeds 20%, which is approximately equivalent to a 10-year coronary artery disease risk of more than 15%. As a minimum, those with cardiovascular risk of more than 30% should be targeted and treated now. When resources allow, others with a cardiovascular risk more than 20% should be targeted progressively. The chart also assists in identification of individuals with a moderately high 10-year cardiovascular risk in the range of 10 to 20% and those in whom it is less than 10%, the green area. Smoking status should reflect lifetime exposure to tobacco. Intervention thresholds. Systolic BP and diastolic BP are both powerful predictors of cardiovascular risk. The British Hypertension Society management guidelines therefore utilize both readings, and treatment should be initiated if they exceed the given threshold. Patients with diabetes or cardiovascular disease are at particularly high risk, and the threshold for initiating antihypertensive therapy is therefore lower, more than 140 over 90 millimeter mercury. In these patient groups, the thresholds for treatment in the elderly are the same as for younger patients. Now, the treatment targets. The optimum BP for reduction. The optimum BP for reduction of major cardiovascular events has been found to be 139 over 83 millimeter mercury, and even lower in patients with diabetes mellitus. Moreover, reducing blood pressure below this level causes no harm. The targets suggested by the British Hypertension Society are ambitious. Primary care strategies have been advised to improve screening and detection of hypertension that in the past remained undetected in up to half of affected individuals. Application of new guidelines should help establish patients on appropriate treatment and allow step up if lifestyle modification and first-line drug therapy fail to control hypertension. Patients taking antihypertensive therapy require follow-up at regular intervals to monitor blood pressure, minimize side effects, and reinforce lifestyle advice. Now, hypertension in old age prevalence. Hypertension affects more than half of all people over the age of 60 years, including isolated systolic hypertension. Risk. Hypertension is the most important risk factor for myocardial infarction, heart failure, and stroke in older people. Benefit of treatment. Absolute benefit from therapy is greatest in older people, at, at least up to age 80 years. Target blood pressure. Targets be relaxed in older people to 150 over 90 millimeter mercury. Tolerance of treatment. Antihypertensives are tolerated as well as in younger patients. Drug of choice, low-dose thiazides, but in the presence of coexistent disease such as gout or diabetes, other agents may be more appropriate. Optimal target blood pressures. For age less than 80 years, the target is clinical BP is less than 140/90 millimeter mercury. Ambulatory or home BP should be less than 135 over 85 millimeter mercury. For age more than 80 years or 80 years, the clinic BP should less than 150 over 90 millimeter mercury, and ambulatory or home BP should less than 140 over 85 millimeter mercury. Both systolic and diastolic values should be attained. Average BP during waking hours. Now, non-drug therapy. Appropriate lifestyle measures may obviate the need for drug therapy in patients with borderline hypertension. Reduce the dose and/or the number of drugs required in patients with established hypertension and directly reduce cardiovascular risk. Correcting obesity, reducing alcohol intake, restricting salt intake, taking regular physical exercise, and increasing consumption of fruit and vegetables can all lower BP. Moreover, stopping smoking, eating oily fish, and adopting a diet that is low in saturated fat may produce further reductions in cardiovascular risk that are independent of changes in blood pressure. Now, drug therapy. Thiazides. The mechanism of action of these drugs is incompletely understood, and it may take up to a month for the maximum effect to be observed. An appropriate daily dose is 2.5 mg benzoflumethiazide or 0.5 mg cyclopenthiazide. More potent loop therapeutics such as furosemide 40 mg daily or bumetanide 1 mg daily have few advantages over thiazides in the treatment of hypertension unless there is substantial renal impairment or they are used in conjunction with an ACE inhibitor. ACE inhibitors. ACE inhibitors enalapril 20 mg daily, ramipril 5 to 10 mg daily, or lisinopril 10 to 40 mg daily are effective and usually well tolerated. They should be used with care in patients with impaired renal function or renal artery stenosis because they can reduce glomerular filtration rate and precipitate renal failure. Electrolytes and creatinine should be checked before and 1 to 2 weeks after commencing therapy. Side effects include first dose hypotension, cough, rash, hyperkalemia, and renal dysfunction. Angiotensin receptor blockers. ERBs, irbesartan 150 to 300 mg daily, valsartan 40 to 160 mg daily, have similar efficacy to ACE inhibitors, but they do not cause cough and are better tolerated. Calcium channel antagonist. Amlodipine 5 to 10 mg daily and nifedipine 30 to 90 mg daily are effective and usually well-tolerated antihypertensive drugs that are particularly useful in older people. Side effects include flushing, palpitations, and fluid retention. The rate-limiting calcium channel antagonist, diltiazem 200 to 300 mg daily, verapamil 240 mg daily, can be useful when hypertension coexists with angina but may cause bradycardia. The main side effects of verapamil is constipation. Beta blockers. These are no longer used as first-line antihypertensive therapy, except in patients with another indication for the drug such as angina. Metoprolol 100 to 200 mg daily, atenolol 50 to 100 mg daily, and bisoprolol 5 to 10 mg daily, which preferentially block cardiac beta-1 adrenoceptors, should be used rather than non-selective agents that also block beta-2 adrenoceptors, which mediate vasodilatation and bronchodilation. Combined beta and alpha blockers. Levitalol 200 mg to 2.4 gram daily in divided doses, and carvedilol 6.25 to 25 mg twice daily are combined beta and alpha adrenoceptor antagonists that are sometimes more effective than pure beta blockers. Levitalol can be used as an infusion in malignant phase hypertension. Other vasodilators. A variety of other vasodilators may be used. These include the alpha-1 adrenoceptor antagonists, prazosin, 0.5 to 20 mg daily in divided doses, indoramine, 25 to 100 mg twice daily, and doxazosin, 1 to 16 mg daily, and drugs that act directly on vascular smooth muscles such as hydralazine, 25 to 100 mg twice daily, and minoxidil 10 to 50 mg daily. Side effects includes fast dose and postural hypotension, headache, tachycardia, and fluid retention. Minoxidil also causes increased facial hair and is therefore unsuitable for female patients. Aspirin. Antiplatelet therapy is a powerful means of reducing cardiovascular risk but may cause bleeding, particularly intracerebral hemorrhage, in a small number of patients. The benefits are thought to outweigh the risk in hypertensive patients aged 50 years or over who have well-controlled BP and either target organ damage or diabetes or a 10-year coronary artery disease risk of at least 15% or 10-year cardiovascular disease risk of at least 20%. Statins. Treating hyperlipidemia can produce a substantial reduction in cardiovascular risk. These drugs are strongly indicated in patients who have established vascular disease or hypertension with a high, at least 10% in 10 years, risk of developing cardiovascular disease. Choice of antihypertensive drugs. Trials that have compared thiazides, calcium antagonists, ACE inhibitors, and ERBs have not shown consistent differences in outcome, efficacy, side effects, or quality of life. Beta blockers, which previously featured as first-line therapy in guidelines, have a weaker evidence base. The choice of antihypertensive therapy is initially dictated by the patient's age and ethnic background. although cost and convenience will influence the exact drug and preparation used. Response to initial therapy and side effects guide subsequent treatment. Comorbid conditions also have an influence on initial drug selection. For example, a beta blocker might be the most appropriate treatment for a patient with angina. Thiazide diuretics and dihydropyridine calcium channel antagonists are the most suitable drugs for treatment in older people. Combination therapy. Although some patients can be treated with a single antihypertensive drug, a combination of drugs is often required to achieve optimal control. Combination therapy may be desirable for other reasons. For example, low-dose therapy with two drugs may produce fewer unwanted effects than treatment with the maximum dose of a single drug. Some drug combinations have complementary or synergistic actions. For example, thiazides increase activity of the renin-angiotensin system, while ACE inhibitors block it. Now, the algorithm of blood pressure management. When a patient's clinic blood pressure is 140/90 millimeter mercury or above, then we will offer him ambulatory blood pressure monitoring or home blood pressure monitoring if ambulatory blood pressure monitoring is declined or not tolerated. Then we offer him to assess cardiovascular risk and target organ damage. If a patient with clinic blood pressure 180/110 millimeter mercury or more, that is more than 180/110 millimeter mercury, then we consider starting antihypertensive drug treatment immediately. So when blood pressure is more than 180/110, we consider starting antihypertensive drug treatment immediately. And if accelerated hypertension or suspected pheochromocytoma, then we refer same day for specialist care. Then we offer him for ambulatory blood pressure monitoring and assess cardiovascular risk and target organ damage. If ambulatory blood pressure monitoring or home blood pressure monitoring is more than 150/95 millimeter mercury, then it is stage 2 hypertension. We offer antihypertensive drug treatment. If ambulatory blood pressure monitoring or home blood pressure monitoring is more than 135/85 millimeter mercury, then it is stage 1 hypertension. If target organ damage present or 10-year cardiovascular risk more than 20%, then offer him antihypertensive drug treatment. If patient is less than 40 years, consider specialist referral and offer lifestyle interventions and offer patient education and interventions to support adherence to treatment, and offer annual review of care to monitor blood pressure, provide support, and discuss lifestyle symptoms and medication. If ambulatory blood pressure monitoring or home blood pressure monitoring is less than 135/85 millimeter mercury, that is normotensive, then offer to check blood pressure at least every 5 years. More often if blood pressure is close to 140/90 millimeter mercury. The influence of comorbidity on choice of antihypertensive drug therapy. Alpha blockers, compelling indication is benign prostatic hypertrophy. Caution about postural hypotension, heart failure. Contraindications, urinary incontinence. ACE inhibitors, compelling indication, heart failure, left ventricular dysfunction, post-MI or established coronary artery disease, type 1 diabetic nephropathy, secondary stroke prevention. Possible indication, chronic renal disease, type 2 diabetic nephropathy. It is cautions about renal impairment, peripheral arterial disease. And compelling contraindication is pregnancy, renovascular disease. Angiotensin II receptor blockers, compelling indication, ACE inhibitor intolerance, type 2 diabetic nephropathy, hypertension with left ventricular hypertrophy, heart failure in ACE intolerant patients after MI. Possible indications, left ventricular dysfunction after MI, intolerance of other antihypertensive drugs, proteinuria or chronic renal disease, heart failure. Caution about renal impairment and peripheral arterial disease, and compelling contraindication is pregnancy. Beta blockers, compelling indication MI, angina, heart failure. Caution about heart failure, peripheral arterial disease, and diabetes, except with coronary artery disease. Compelling contraindication, asthma or COPD, heart block. Calcium channel blockers, compelling indication, older patients, isolated systolic hypertension, possible indications, angina. Calcium channel blockers, rate limiting, compelling indication, angina, possible indication, older patients, caution about combination with beta blocker. Contraindication is AB block, heart failure, thiazide or thiazide-like diabetes. Compelling indication, older patients, isolated systolic hypertension, heart failure, secondary stroke prevention. Contraindication is in gout. ACE inhibitors or ARBs may be beneficial in chronic renal failure and renovascular disease, but should be used with caution, close supervision, and specialist advice when there is established and significant renal impairment. Caution with ACE inhibitor and ARBs in peripheral arterial disease because of association with renovascular disease. Beta blockers are used increasingly to treat stable heart failure but may worsen acute heart failure. Thiazides or thiazide-like diuretics may sometimes be necessary to control blood pressure in people with a history of gout, ideally used in combination with allopurinol. Now, what is refractory hypertension? Refractory hypertension refers to the situation where multiple drug treatments do not give adequate control of BP. Although this may be due to genuine resistance to therapy, in some cases, a more common cause of treatment failure is non-adherence to drug therapy. Resistant hypertension can also be caused by failure to recognize an underlying cause, such as renal artery stenosis or pheochromocytoma. There is no easy solution to problems with adherence, but simple treatment regimens, attempts to improve rapport with the patient, and careful supervision can all help. Spironolactone is a particularly useful addition in patients with treatment-resistant hypertension. Accelerated hypertension. Accelerated or malignant hypertension is a rare condition that can complicate hypertension of any etiology. It is characterized by accelerated microvascular damage with necrosis in the walls of small arteries and arterioles, that is fibrinoid necrosis, and by intravascular thrombosis. The diagnosis is based on evidence of high BP and rapidly progressive end-organ damage such as retinopathy grade 3 or 4, renal dysfunction, especially proteinuria, and/or hypertensive encephalopathy. Left ventricular failure may occur, and if this is untreated, death occurs within months. Management. In accelerated phase hypertension, lowering blood pressure too quickly may compromise tissue perfusion due to altered autoregulation and can cause cerebral damage, including occipital blindness, and precipitate coronary or renal insufficiency. Even in the presence of cardiac failure or hypertensive encephalopathy, a controlled reduction to a level of about 150-90 mm mercury over a period of 24 to 48 hours is ideal. In most patients, it is possible to avoid parenteral therapy and bring BP under control with bed rest and oral drug therapy. Intravenous or intramuscular levetolol 2 mg per minute to a maximum of 200 mg. Intravenous GTN 0.6 to 1.2 mg per hour. Intramuscular hydralazine 5 or 10 mg aliquots repeatedly at half-hourly intervals, and intravenous sodium nitroprusside 0.3 to 1 microgram per kg body weight per minute are all effective but require careful supervision, preferably in a high dependency unit. Thank you, friends.